Hello everyone, I'm Professor Planck. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Before we get into today's video, shout out to my most recent super thankers, Bovine Joni, Piao Meow Noir, Donald Ortiz, and James Lamica. Thank you all very much for supporting me. You are the secular sauce on my all-you-can-eat atheist wings. Thank you for helping me do what I do. Well, today we're looking at a channel called Incognito Islamic Productions and their video, Questions That No Atheist Can Answer. Well, challenge accepted. It's always very strange when you run across videos like this insisting that they've got the gotcha questions that will stall an atheist reactor's brain like a potato in a tailpipe of a Chevy S10. But then, when you actually listen to the questions, they tend to be poorly thought out, full of faulty premises, straw man fallacies, and outright questions that have been answered time and again, and it's clear that they never even did a basic search to see if their questions had been addressed in the past. It's almost as if they don't actually care what atheists' responses would be, and they're actually just throwing these questions to their own congregations in an effort to convince them that these questions have never been answered by atheists because there's no answers to be had. So they stand as incontrovertible proofs for their God's existence and their religion being correct. But on the off chance that they actually mean these questions sincerely for the atheist community to answer, I'll give it a shot and see what kind of queries they have for us. So let's get stuck in.
What are the questions that no atheist will be able to answer? A. How did existence emerge out of no space and no time? How can an atheist assume that his atheism is valid when the moment of the start of existence is a stark proof on the creativity of the Creator and his ability to originate existence?
So basically, how did the Big Bang happen is what you're asking. A very common theistic question. But this one is slightly worse than the usual fare. Normally, a theist brings up the Big Bang and will ask about what caused it to happen, aiming for the first cause or prime mover kind of argument. This question didn't even attempt that much. You asked, how did space-time erupt out of no space-time? Not what caused it, but how could something arise where there was nothing like it before? Now, asking what caused it would have been a better route to go, because since we cannot, at present, examine anything prior to the Planck time, or a tiny fraction of a second after the Big Bang began, we truly do not know what, if anything, caused the Big Bang. But you asked about how space-time could emerge at all, and that's something we do have a better handle on. It tends to get very technical and difficult to wrap one's head around, but it is something that is currently being explored in quantum physics. Basically, because quantum physics has a tendency to have virtual particles popping in and out of existence constantly, you can have particles that begin to interact with each other in certain complex ways that can give rise to space-time itself. There are currently two competing theories of how this works. Now, I'm certainly not a physicist and am truly a layperson in terms of these ideas, so I'll detail them in the physicist's own terms and then try to explain them in more layperson terms. So forgive me if I don't get them quite right. But basically, the first idea comes through string theory and posits that there are things called an anti-de Sitter and a conformal field theory. And the conformal field theory is like the two-dimensional surface of a three-dimensional sphere, and the anti-de Sitter is the interior of that sphere. So think of it like the skin of a balloon and the inside of that balloon. Quantum entanglement of particles along the surface give rise to regions of space inside of it. Now, the other idea is loop quantum gravity, which describes space-time as non-continuous and existing in chunks. These chunks we experience simultaneously and give us the idea of continuous time. Think about it like the pixels on a television. They're all separate dots, but we see them all together, and it gives us the impression of a continuous image. Now again, I'm certainly no theoretical physicist, so I'm not fully equipped to explain these concepts in their entirety, but the shorthand and basic way to answer your overarching question about how spacetime emerges from no spacetime is simply through quantum physics. It allows for various particles to pop into existence at random, and these particles can interact in a whole host of ways to give rise to what we experience as spacetime. And as physicist Lawrence Krauss puts it,
because due to the laws of quantum mechanics and relativity, we now know that empty space is a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles that are popping in and out of existence at every moment. And in fact, for that kind of nothing, if you wait long enough, you're guaranteed by the laws of quantum mechanics to produce something.
B. How did no life transform into life? How did matter mutate from lifelessness into living cell? With all our techniques and advancements, we cannot, till this very moment, originate the simplest form of life. So how can we explain the origination of life in the dead matter? Wouldn't we have been at least able to originate a form of life that supersedes the one that originated in the dead matter by at least 1,000,000 times?
first and foremost, stop calling things dead that were never alive. Dead is a state of being that proceeds from being alive. Before life arose, there was nothing dead. Something can't be dead unless it had once been alive. But that's just a minor sticking point of mine. Now, to answer your question of how life can arise from non-life, that's called abiogenesis. And in recent years, we've made great strides to being able to reproduce this process. We've been able to replicate simple RNA from non-living material. And we know that RNA, under the right conditions, becomes DNA and the essential building blocks for all life. And you kind of shoot your own question in the foot when you acknowledge this by saying,
with all our techniques and advancements, we cannot, till this very moment, originate the simplest form of life.
So you are at least aware that we have recreated the basics for life from non-living material. But then you try to hedge your bet by insisting that we should have been able to create life 1,000,000 times more complex than basic life by now. Well, why? Why should we have been able to do it before now? What is so special about right here, right now, that we should have uncovered the knowledge of abiogenesis already? When Ben Franklin discovered electricity, couldn't naysayers have said, if humans had the ability to harness lightning and use it as an energy source, shouldn't we have been able to do that by now? Or when penicillin was discovered, had someone said, if mold could be used to treat infections, don't you think we would have figured that out by now? And then these pursuits would be abandoned, and we'd still be reading by candlelight or dying of small wounds getting infected. Don't shame discoveries because they weren't discovered sooner. If you're going to go that route, then throw away your smartphone because you didn't have it in the 1980s.
C. How can the atheist argue against the annihilation of all mankind? What is the rational, substantial, and scientific evidence an atheist can present to prove that annihilation of all mankind is a mistake? The material world knows no right and wrong. So annihilation of mankind must be equal to keeping them alive from their perspective.
How can I argue that annihilating mankind is bad? Because I'm part of mankind and I don't want to die. Do you want to die? No? Then, yeah, there you go. Stupidest fucking question I've ever heard. Crying out loud.
D. Atheism assumes that human beings are just animals who came into existence after a long and slow sequence of evolution from meaner beings. So what if a higher being came into existence? Will it have the right to put us all in cages and use us as lab rats? The Darwinist answer that we derive from matter is yes. So, what's the purpose from protecting mankind or providing them with meaning or purpose when it comes to atheism? Atheism here is unable to explain the reality of man.
For starters, atheism does not assume any of that. Evolution is not the same as atheism. It is possible for atheists to reject evolution. An atheist could believe that we're all part of a computer program and that we were created yesterday, and all of our memories and history and evidence of evolution is all just part of that program. An atheist could believe that a council of space wizards created our planet and all the life on it. And atheists could believe in universe-belching unicorns from the 8th dimension. All atheism means is not believing in any god or gods. It does not entail believing in anything else, even something like evolution. Secondly, yes, we humans are indeed animals. This is not a question that is up for debate. And why is that? Because we invented the term animal, and we decide what it means. Even among the religious, this is understood. In all Abrahamic religions, the idea of Adam and Eve as the first humans existing, and as part of that story, Adam was tasked with naming all of the flora and fauna on the planet. Not that God named everything and handed those names down to Adam, but Adam and humans decide what to name things and what to classify them as. We as humans have created names and classifications for all life on this planet and have grouped things into domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. The part applicable to this question is the 5 kingdoms, which are animal, plant, fungi, protista, and monera. We humans are classified in the animal kingdom. We have decided it. It's been put to bed, case closed, even by the religious belief in the divine edict to name and classify everything on the planet. We have placed ourselves in the animal kingdom. We are animals. Get over it. Now, to the idea of what if a higher or more powerful being or race decided to lock us in cages and experiment on us? How could we say that it's wrong or it doesn't have the right? Well, it would have the right insofar as it would have the ability to do so, and nothing or no one could stop it from doing so. We would say that it's wrong from our perspective because it would be doing something to us that was undesirable. But from its perspective, it would totally have the right to do so because it would view itself as superior. Kind of like how, in your view, an all-powerful God throws people into hell for all eternity, infinite punishment for finite offenses, and you make excuses for this higher being as having the right to do so simply because it's a higher being. It's not atheism that is imposing a cosmic might makes right perspective. We are the ones arguing against such a notion based on non-supernatural moral frameworks like secular humanism, for instance. You theists are the ones advocating for such an idea.
E. What if, according to evolution, we proved that one race is higher than the other? Will the higher race be entitled to transform the lesser race into used matter, as we do with the lesser insects or animals? Again, the Darwinist answer is yes. This very argument is enough to obliterate atheism from any mind that utilizes common sense, since the only criteria to judge who is better than who is the criterion of God-fearingness, not by color or strength.
That's racist!
So, now that we've established that this is some racist-ass bullshit, let's sift through the feces in question. 1. Evolution does not classify things as higher or lower, especially within a species. Every human is exactly as evolved as every other human. In fact, every living thing alive today is exactly as evolved as every other living thing. We humans are exactly as evolved as the bacteria on our skin. Because evolution charts changes in allele frequencies over time. We humans have been evolving for billions of years. Do you know how long the bacteria on your skin has been evolving? The exact same amount of time. Everything alive is as evolved as everything else. 2. You cannot prove any kind of higher or lower classification within a species. Race is a social construct, not a scientific one.
Now here's the same map of the same continent with just one color. And it turns out that everybody on Earth is descended from people that live here in Africa. And then as groups of us moved around the world, the color of our skin had to change. And here's why. Our skin is where we make vitamin D. If you don't get enough ultraviolet, you don't get enough vitamin D. But if you get too much ultraviolet, then you break down your folates. You have to have it in perfect balance. And because the ultraviolet varies, the color of our skin varies. And that's it, everybody. That's why we have different colored skin.
So there are no higher or lower races, and science can never justify such a notion since we are all the same species. Then 3, your claim that we can judge who is better than who by God-fearingness is theocentrism. It's prejudice. It's elitist bigotry. It's disgusting.
You suck, you jackass.
F. Atheists argue that morals are relative, meaning can be seen from more than one perspective. So, honesty can be better than betrayal, or betrayal can be better in some cases. Yet, when confronted with their own trials, they claim outright that morality is objective and that things like honesty or betrayal are absolute. Because if morals are relative, then immorality makes no sense, since we will never be able to set a line between morality and immorality. This is definitely a clear contradiction, because if morality was objective and absolute, then this law of morality must have had a lawgiver, the will of Allah, and divine accountability. If morality was relative, then no atheist must complain from immorality or even comprehend its concept.
You claim that atheists insist that morality is objective when pressed, and that honesty, being better than betrayal, is an absolute?
Damnable lie!
The only way I have ever heard any atheist claim morality is in any way objective is insofar as where rules are espoused unambiguously and not subject to interpretation, such as it's illegal to steal someone's purse on the street, or it's illegal to flee the scene of an auto accident you're involved in. These kind of rules are only objective in that they don't differ from person to person. But the motivation that underpins them is absolutely subjective, as all notions of right and wrong are. And when you try to claim that honesty is better than betrayal as an absolute, that is laughably short-sighted. I mean, that discounts the entire idea of espionage as a practice. Not to get all Godwin on you, but any Germans who spied on and betrayed the Nazis were, by our perspective today, morally superior to those who remained loyal to them and stayed honest with them. Now, even this isn't an absolute truth, as it's based on our modern-day anti-Nazi perspective. The Nazis at the time, and even sympathizers today, would disagree with the idea that those who spied on and betrayed the German forces were acting morally. Morality is in no way absolute. It is always in the eye of the beholder and subject to the perspective of the individual. And since there's no absolute law of morality, then there's no moral lawgiver. But then when you go on to say,
if morality was relative, then no atheist must complain from immorality or even comprehend its concept.
What utter nonsense! Just because atheists don't believe in objective, divine-mandated morality does not mean that we don't believe in subjective morality. It also doesn't mean that we don't believe in and accept common ethical standards. Morality is unique to the individual, and ethics are adopted by the group, organization, and/or culture. So since we are individuals, of course we have a concept of morality and immorality. It's just going to be likely different somewhat from yours and everyone else's, as everyone's personal sense of morality is as unique to them as a fingerprint. Even though, much like a fingerprint, it is extremely similar to most other people's. And since we are a part of various groups, organizations, and cultures, we're going to have an understanding of ethical standards within those frameworks. The idea that, as atheists, we can't even have a concept of morality if we don't believe it was handed down from on high is complete BS and a lazy attempt at a religious gotcha if ever there were one.
G. How did the amazing constants of physics emerge? All of these constants entail very intricate differences that must never vary, even by the slightest or minutest fraction, or the whole universe would collapse. For instance, the cosmological constant is fine-tuned to 120 decibel places, and if it was 1 decibel more or less, the whole universe would collapse. This precision proves that accuracy of a great maker, noting that the constants are numerous in physics and all of them are intricately precise.
The cosmological constant is not fine-tuned. It simply is what it is, and we developed a numerical representation of it to explain it. Much like the freezing point of water being 0 degrees Celsius and the boiling point being 100 degrees Celsius is not fine-tuned. Water just freezes and boils at the temperature that it does, and then we created a temperature scale to describe it. The gravitational pull of Earth was not fine-tuned for things to fall at 9.8 meters per second squared. That is just how it happens to work, and we measured it. If the laws of physics were different, then we would understand them differently. There are changes that could exist within things like the gravitational constant of the universe, or how atoms bond together, that could still support a life-filled universe. And if that were the case, we would have different equations and constants to describe them. And you are majorly misrepresenting the cosmological constant as well. If you don't know, the cosmological constant has been an often revised and constantly puzzled over and constantly shifting quandary in physics. As theoretical physicist Sabine Hossenfelder puts it, the cosmological constant is technically just a constant of nature, a number in an equation that can take on any value. The fact that it has the value it has is just a numerical coincidence. You could just take the constant and be done with it. Hossenfelder says all these debates about why does it have the value it has are not scientifically good questions. So don't try to use that to basically assert the teleological argument. And even if you could claim that if some physical value of existence were a little different, then we wouldn't exist, that still wouldn't be any kind of proof for God. If the values of existence were such that the universe couldn't support life, then we wouldn't be here, and the lifeless universe would go on without us. In short, the universe is how it is. It had to exist in some way with some physics. It just happened to be the way that it does exist with these physics.
H. How did the genome emerge within the living cells? A code must require a coder, and this genome designates what each cell will be used for. Doesn't this prove that there is a unique maker dictating very specific codes?
Chromosomes, which make up a genome, are not code. They are structures of nucleic acids and proteins within cells. Calling chemistry and biological structures code is just an attempt to obfuscate from what they actually are and conflate them with something man-made to give the impression that since codes are intelligently designed, genomes and chromosomes must be as well. Well, no, that's not how it works. Biology is not code. Genomes are not code. How did they get here? Evolution. Simply put, life evolves to become more complex over time. Life started out very, very simple. And we've already gone over that in a previous question about how life arose. It started very simply, got more complex over time, yada yada yada, skip a few billion years, and it evolves into the current diverse life on this planet.
I. Where did morality and values come from? When it comes to atheism, Atheism sees the universe as a tumultuous sea of atoms that makes no sense and have no purpose, which was one of the driving motives to immorality and depravity. But since morality does exist, then atheism is invalid.
I really feel like we answered this one already in our exploration of the non-existence of objective morality. Where does morality come from to an atheist? The subjective interpretation of the individual and the common ethical standards within an organizational framework. Since no divine moral lawgiver is necessary where subjective morality or ethics are concerned, there is no disconnect between this view of morality and atheism. And as far as atheists not believing there is any purpose to anything, that's wrong. Atheists don't believe in any God-imposed purpose, but that we choose our purpose for ourselves. And I have plenty of purpose in my life. I would say you actually do the same thing. You choose your purpose for yourself based on your own desires and beliefs about what's best for you. The only difference is that after you've decided what your purpose will be for yourself, you convince yourself that this is what God wants for you and that God just inspired you or spoke to you and convinced you of that purpose. So the only real difference between us where purpose is concerned is that you delude yourself into believing that you didn't choose it for yourself.
To sum up our argumentation against atheism, since there is light, then there has to be a source for this light.
The sun.
Since there is shade, then there has to be a body causing the shade.
Tell your mom to sit her ass down. She's blocking your sun.
Since there are intricate objects starting from the quarks and ending with the galaxies, then there has to be an originator.
Complexity is not indicative of design. Both simplicity and complexity can arise naturally. The four fundamental forces of the universe insist upon increasing complexity within a location with enough matter and energy for them to work on over a long enough period of time.
The Quranic argumentation is the strongest ever. Do you not see how those who dispute Allah's signs are turned away from the right path? Those who reject the book, and that with which we sent our messengers, shall soon know. Translation of the meaning of the Quran, chapter 40, verses 69 and 70.
Which brings us to the end of the video and the end of their questions for atheists. Boil all these questions down to their basics, and it was really just the teleological argument, the cosmological argument, and claims of objective morality. They did hit on some seriously complex aspects of physics that require some hefty answers about string theory, quantum mechanics, and theoretical physics, but most of it was malformed and misused, such as when they misrepresented the cosmological constant. It's possible that it was an honest mistake and they likely didn't understand it themselves, but it's also likely that they were banking on their audience not understanding it either, so their misrepresentation of it would fly right under the radar and come across like a poignant question. But for a list of questions that atheists supposedly cannot answer, we still managed to answer every one of them. And they've all been answered by many other atheists several times over. It's just that people like Incognito Islamic Productions just don't care to listen to the answers. But thank you for listening to them, and thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Until next time, I'm Professor Plink reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.